Ready when we are? Okay. If I get there.
Are we recording now?
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to our July 2022 CVTA Finance Committee meeting. If you do not know, this marks our last meeting as a Finance Committee. And I want to say thank you for allowing me to serve as the chair of this fine committee for the last 2 years. It seems like 10 years, but also it seems like yesterday that we all came together to start this endeavor, working together to fund transportation in the region. I just want to thank my colleagues here at the table, and this is probably for some concluding remarks, but I want to start here at the beginning. It's been fun, but it's also been a lot of work as well. But an opportunity to show our region working together, and so I appreciate all my friends, all my colleagues, and all the localities involved, making this what it is, a great opportunity for us to take the region forward. So I appreciate that, and Ms. Farson, I want you to certify quorum. We have one.
Yes, sir. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
I'm here.
Hanover County, Vice Chair Peterson.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton.
Present.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Present.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown. Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum, and we'll move on to item 1 on our agenda, the consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. I do have one change to the agenda. I would like to add to old business and informational updates on the investment portfolio. There's no questions. All in favor of this amendment, vote aye, and all. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed? The motion passes. Let's move that on to the agenda. And we'll move on to item 2, the approval of the June 8th, 2022 meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. We'll move on to now item 3, the open public comment period. If there's anyone here from the public who signed up for to offer comment today, or is there anyone online, or have received anything via email or in person?
We do not, sir.
There's no public comment. Therefore, we'll move on to item 4, the CVTA Finance Committee Chairman's Report. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and I do not have a formal Chairman's Report this morning. We will have Mr. Parsons and our newly elected CVTA TAC Chair, Mr. Rona Moore-Clark, speak momentarily, and that's how we'll move on to item 5 of the activities report. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item, 5A, is a review on page 7 of the financial activities and investment reports. As the chair mentioned, we do have an agenda item under old business to go over some of the current investment activities. We can provide an update at that point. This is a report for May, and we are working with Chesterfield County to make sure that these reports are current and updated as quickly as possible and out to the Finance Committee for your information. Be happy to take any questions. Ms. Longacre is actually here with us as well, in case there are any concerns or additional questions that I might not be able to address.
Questions?
We'll wait the other update, I guess.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to item 5B, we do have a renewal of our Versa coverage, and this is, if you recall, it's in the administrative and operating budget. There's a line item for $10,000. This is a renewal of our existing coverage. No changes in the amounts or the coverage items, and the total for that renewal was just over $2,600. Due to that fact and the budget had plenty of coverage for this, we treated that as an administrative item and moved forward with that renewal. So just an information item for the Finance Committee that is moving forward well under the expected budget amount. No questions? I'm happy
Chair, is
to.
that gonna require a motion to the full committee for approval?
It's already
We treat-
budgeted, I think.
Yes,
It's
we
already
treat it
budgeted.
Okay,
as
that's fine.
administrative.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chair, if there's no other questions, I'd be happy to send it forward to Ms. Clark.
But that's it for item B, so let's move on to item C.
All right, good morning, everyone. The CVTA TAC held its meeting on Monday, July 11th, and there were a few items that were discussed. We discussed the Fall Line Trail segment prioritization and the applicable programming for Ms. Longacre's disbursement of funds in relation to this and other regional projects that's been approved to begin to move those projects forward. Mr. Parsons did note that Mr. Gregory is currently working with VDOT and our member localities to get the CVTA agreements in place. Those are necessary to be in place for the regional projects as well as the Fall Line Trail segments that are being administered by Henrico and Richmond. We do plan to have a August 3rd Fall Line Trail Working Group meeting in which we'll discuss scheduling and timelines for administering those design, build, and other projects for the Fall Line Trail. There was a reminder to member governments for quarterly reporting of CVTA local funds coming due again, as well as annual reporting requirements for FY22. A time frame for August TAC meeting will give member governments through September to be authorized by individual member governments bodies to certify the reporting, but the actual spreadsheet needs to be submitted by August 1st to be compliant with the policies and procedures. So again, this is the expenditures spent for FY22, which would be July 1 through June 30th of 22. Finally, an update of the CVTA VDOT SPA execution. Mr. Mann informed the TAC that this topic will be discussed during the July CTB workshop agenda, but because there is no meeting in August, it will be an action item for approval of the SPAs related to the Fall Line Trail in September. And Mr. Mann also let us know that they were seeking a blanket approval for all the SPAs at that time so that we wouldn't have to go back to the CTB. I'll take any questions, if any.
No questions?
None pop into my head at this point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thank you
report.
so much, Ms. Moore Clark. We'll move on to old business. And at the top of old business, there are amended item, that's the investment portfolio update. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. There is a one-page memo in front of each of the members at the table providing a current update on the investment portfolio for the regional fund. So this is just focused on the 35% revenue. And this follows the requests of this committee for the past few months to investigate the options for investment of funds so that we can have a higher yield return than we currently experience. If you recall, the conversation has been that we need some more clarity on when funds might need to be available for the regional projects that Ms. Moore Clark has just highlighted. So that's been the effort that's been ongoing with Chesterfield County and the Treasurer's Office. As the memo mentions, there have been multiple conversations with our financial advisors, PFM, and understanding that the preferred strategy is to move forward with cash flow projection for the regional projects. We don't yet have a finally accurate tool for predicting cash flows accurately, but PFM has advised that at this point, investments with maturities of 1 year or less is the recommended timeframe. I think we can, over time, as we better understand the cash flow needs for the regional projects as those are committed, we can possibly look at longer maturities. But the schedule below, or the schedule on the memo, reflects current holdings as of July 12th for the regional fund. And the total there is just over $100 million.
Any questions?
I think obviously the thing we're still dealing with is when are we gonna spend, when do we have to spend the money? And tax, it looks like, sounds like they're really on top of trying to pull that together. I'm just sort of thinking that if we take the approach that best case scenario of spending the money, then we're probably gonna be safe on that, because the odds are we're never gonna spend it as quickly as we think we are, because things just don't go as quickly as we think they are. But if you look at, if we come to a best case scenario, that ought to free us up to make investments based on assuming that they're gonna be taken out as quickly as we hope they will. But I don't think we'd get behind by and start putting some of this money into better returns.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I do have a question for Rebecca Longacre, since she is here.
Treasurer
Can
Longacre,
you come up?
you wanna join us?
Oh, you didn't tell me you were. Thank you for coming up.
Good morning.
Morning.
So the accounts, the investments that you've shown here, can you give the committee any idea what type of performance they've had in the past? Because I know you've probably invested some money in these things before.
Anything we invest in is going to be completely safe. We have the code of Virginia to follow, so we can only, thank you very much. We can only invest in what's permitted there. And what we're investing in is not going to be something that's going to lose money, which is my beginning, is I have to keep principles safe. Liquidity, so you can spend it, is next, and then return. If I can't keep it where you all can spend it, I have to sell something and lose money on it. The return's not worth it. So it's better for me to keep things safe, so that everyone on here is going to be safe. The brokers that we work with are well aware of our policy, well aware of the Code of Virginia's policy, and only present things that we can purchase with these goals in mind.
In relation to some of the investments you've done in the past, we'll talk about Chesterfield for a minute. What type of returns have you seen on some of those investments? Because I know they've been.
Currently, they're not really as good as we would like in the past, 19 backwards. From 17 to 19, when I came on as a deputy, we were investing more of the county's money. Returns were great. It's still about the same percentages. 3% is usually the highest I have ever seen for a government type investment. What we've had here, and you all are well aware of that, it's been 0.07 has been like with the liquidity funds. The investments that we're looking at now, 0.27, that's really awesome compared to everything else. And that's on average what the county itself is having as well. There's not a whole lot out there that's any higher than that. Now, of course, with the county, we know when we can spend it. We know what our dry spells are when we bring it in. So we can go out this far. And that's what the goal is here, is, as you can see, we've got 0 to 1 month. That's liquidity. It's there. You tell me 10 o'clock, I can pull it by that day. 3 to 6 months, when that one matures, I buy another 3 to 6 months. And those are usually 6 months. So that when you all need something, it's there. And if you say, okay, we're gonna invest this in need this in 4 months, then when that one matures, I don't reinvest it. I just keep that waiting for you all to spend. And that, again, you all know, in the bank, that's not earning anything. So that will go into the liquid pool. So at least it's earning, and I think that's come up about almost to 1% now. So we will still be earning something. I don't leave anything sitting in the bank except for $1 million, because if you tell me today you need it right this minute, I want to have some money for you all to spend. But if I have to pull something out of investments, take that back. If it matures, I'm going to put it into a liquid investment so that we're still earning something at all times.
Thank you.
What does YTM stand for on
I am not the investment manager. Which one are you on
this?
there?
The column, the middle column.
Oh, it's the year to your yield to market cost. It's got a couple different factors, and off the top of my head, I can't explain them. The actual rate for what we have calculated on here is 2.76 for the very first one. But by the time it gets to market, it matures, it'll be 2.47 with the different factors in the market. That's how it's calculated with our system. And then we'll certainly get you a better explanation.
Okay, like I say, I'm not an accountant, so I need a little help with some of these terms sometimes.
I haven't touched this for a little while.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sorry to put you on the spot, but I know you can handle it.
That's why I'm
Madam Treasurer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no more questions, I think we'll move on to our next item on old business is the nominating update.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not new information, but it hasn't been discussed at the Finance Committee. If you recall, the last authority meeting on June 17th, nominating committee provided a report chaired by Mr. Hodges from Ashland with a recommendation initially to continue the Finance Committee seats that were held by Mr. Peterson and Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown considered the request and has ceded his seat for the coming year to the other nomination, which was Ms. Page from New Kent County. So the nominating committee had recommended for Finance Committee, outside of the three larger jurisdictions mechanism, to recommend appointment of Mr. Peterson and Ms. Page to fill out the five seat committee. The other recommendation from the nominating committee was for the FY23 chair to consider establishing basically an ad hoc committee to look at a rotation system involving all CVTA members who are not automatically reappointed. This is very similar in nature to the procedures that are in place for both Planner VA as well as the Richmond Regional TPO. So we do have experience, and I think overall the members have appreciated that consistency, knowing that there is a rotational model in place. So that's for consideration at Friday's authority meeting when elections take place, and these matters are going to be on the table. So I just wanted to put that in front of the Finance Committee in case there's any additional discussion or questions.
You know, the only comment I'll make, Mr. Parsons, is I know we had a slight discussion here, and I think that we should probably pass it on to the full body at some point, and it's regarding the membership of the CTB member as an ex officio to the Finance Committee. And also, I think we have to think about as we move forward and we get a CEO hired as well, making the CEO, the executive director, or whatever we're calling it, also an ex officio to the Finance Committee as well. And I do believe that would require a change in the bylaws though, right, Mr. Parsons?
I do believe so. We can verify that. It may just be in the guidance documents, but we can check.
I think it'll require a policy.
Do we have to recommend this move to the full authority for consideration?
No, I
Or
don't think
do I
we
need to
do.
can I just bring it up in my report?
I think that it can be brought up in the report. I think it's actually already on the agenda for Friday already, if I remember looking at the agenda for Friday.
Yes, but not the additional consideration of
So I think,
Or do we just wait till the new chair and the vice chair are elected here?
We've discussed this before, and I think we were all in agreement, particularly with CTB, but I would assume the executive director would be here all the time, period.
Anyway, right.
Whether we make him ex officio or not,
right.
or we make him ex administrator if he isn't. It's but you know, I'm happy with it either way, but I think we ought to recommend it going forward.
Mr. Peterson, I think you're correct. I mean, the executive director should be in this seat.
Without any question.
To make sure.
Sitting right next to whoever at the Finance Committee meeting. Yeah, right. I guess we'll make that recommendation at the meeting then. All right.
Chairman?
Yes.
We did mention this at the TPO meeting last week, as far as the rotational thing that Chad just mentioned. And I'd just like to share a comment that I shared with the TPO.
Sure.
Is that right now, the Plan RVA has a rotational system, so does the TPO. And I don't see a problem with the CVTA also having a rotational system. But I want to caution us to make sure we don't put the rotation so that the same jurisdiction has dual responsibilities on the three different, because so many of the people are on both committees or different committees. If, for instance, if Hanover County is set to be the chair of the Plan RVA this year, you don't want Hanover County also having to be CVTA, or same thing, or for any of the jurisdictions. They shouldn't overlap on that. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carroll.
I agree, I concur with what he said. I think there also needs to be some other flexibility in whatever we end up putting in the bylaws. And the reason is, you may have an election cycle that takes place and someone may, or even a chair appointment. And as we know, for the localities, with the exception of Richmond, it's the chair or designee. And you could have a chair that gets in and who was on CVTA who said, all right, I'm gonna appoint someone else to do it. And so you get a leadership change with someone coming in who may not feel comfortable. I don't think we should say you're new and you shouldn't get it, but they should be at least asked. And I'll give you an example. When I got elected, I was asked to chair another committee right out of the gate somewhere else. And not having the experience, I felt would be better served if someone with experience on the committee would be in that role.
That's right.
And so I think we need to make sure we have some flexibility built in to give whoever ends up in that position at least the opportunity to say, yeah, I'll do it, or I think I'd like to defer to the next on the list, and maybe you can put me behind that. We'll come up with some kind of rotation for that.
I may be wrong. I don't think this is a bylaws issue. This should be a general policy issue, which means it can be adapted on for any given occasion
And Ms. Heater has
versus
some,
being in the bylaws.
Ms. Heater has some input.
I was gonna agree with Mr. Peterson. In the TPO and the Plan RVA bylaws, it does not speak to the rotation. It's part of the guidance documents that were approved, so they're administrative. And the scenario that Mr. Carroll described is quite common in my history here at Plan RVA. And so that has enabled the board and the nominating committee to navigate those instances where someone doesn't feel prepared and, a locality can essentially either decline and pass on their rotation, or they can organize to be able to change the rotation to be able to allow, not to wait 9 years essentially for that. So I would say that Mr. Parsons and I have quite a bit of experience with, with supporting those discussions. And we also have taken to monitoring the leadership cycle for the other regional bodies here in the Richmond region. So that the very issue that Mr. Peterson raised about just kind of understanding how that rotation across the different organizations here in Central Virginia function, and what that does to the power dynamic, so.
Makes sense to me. All around. So we're gonna have to, in the future, sort of update those guiding policies, I imagine? Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I think it's always critical for us to put in that foundation the stability that we need, because, although we at the table today, we don't know who will be at the table in the future.
That's correct.
So we want to make sure that we have that foundation set and with strength. Very important, I think.
Very important indeed. All right, now we'll move on to, seeing any more comments or questions, we'll move on to new business. New business begins with item 7, the presentation on new auditing standard. Mr. Michael A. Garber.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Garber is joining us virtually, so he will be, I think, sharing his slides on the screen momentarily.
I don't think he has a presentation, it's just a
Oh,
verbal.
okay.
I think we need to.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me
Yes.
and see me? Great, great, great.
See you, no, but just audio, so we're okay.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, thank you. I don't like joining virtually. I would much rather be there in person this morning. So it's not something that I like to do, but there were some other things that came up that required me to have to join virtually this morning. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And just take a few minutes. I really have two items that I want to cover with you. One is the CAM or the key audit matters that you just referenced. This is something that isn't new to the audit world, but it is new to local government and things of that nature. And CAM or the key audit matters is something that the auditor and management typically discuss. It may include areas of significant audit risk, areas requiring significant estimates, judgments by management, things of that nature that may require us to include in the arrangement letter, really detailed audit work as we do our work, and then also put in our opinion that gets disseminated to everybody in the public as well as to what was a key audit matter. We've discussed this with management, and we don't think you have any key audit matters. When I think of things like that, it's not necessarily just cash and investments. But if we had a large amount of derivatives in those investments that are difficult to audit and difficult to ascertain support for, that might be a key audit matter. Other items that you don't have goodwill, intangible, significant contingencies that may not be easy to audit. So those are the types of things that if we had them, we might point those out and do and have to say what audit procedures we've done and things of that nature. And we don't think you have any to compare you to others. None of our local governments that we audit are having CAM or reporting CAM. Just so you know how you compare there as well. So that is just a new standard. It is something that we will have to consider every single year. So every year we'll meet with management and discuss types of transactions and things that have occurred throughout the year. And if anything that may arise that would cause us to have to report CAM. So that's in a nutshell what that is. We'll continue to have these conversations going forward with management and other finance committees. Second topic that I have, and of course it's in a public session, so I may not get any answers today, but I want to make sure I open up the lines of communication with you. You know, we always assess the risk of fraud within all of our entities. And we'll certainly talk with management and those in internal controls about this, but we always like to ask an audit committee or finance committee if there are any areas of concern before we start our audit and conclude our audit that they want us to look at. And public session and public meeting is not necessarily the best place for you to answer that question for me. And so I'm not going to expect you to do that today, but I do want to open it up, that question for you to consider. If there are items that you want us to look at, please reach out to me through phone or email so that we can have that discussion. So those were really the two topics that I had to go over with you today. Happy to answer any questions on either of those, if I can offer any more explanation. Or if you have any other topics that you want to discuss with me this morning, I'm happy to do that as well.
Any questions from the committee?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Thornton.
with your indulgence, sir. Are there some pitfall areas you would suggest to finance group itself?
I think you all are a unique managed organization right now. You know, normally that area of concern would have to do, let's discuss management and their role of approval and things of that nature. Your internal controls are very segregated with all the entities participating. Also, you know, IT and IS is always a concern. Technically right now, CVTA is outsourcing all of that to the localities that are handling their books and transactions. And so those are usually areas that I'm concerned with. As far as the finance committee themselves, No, I'm listening to what you have going on. I've read back through minutes. I think you all in the committee are handling things appropriately, and are doing your duties as required.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you. If I could follow up on Mr. Thornton's question to some degree, I mean, we're talking about key audit matters and we're talking about CVTA in this committee. But as you mentioned, because of all the different jurisdictions, do we need to look at these things in our individual jurisdictions as well, because of how we've split things up? And if so, what are the key audit matters that we ought to be looking at? So I'll say in my case, Hanover County, or Chesterfield, Henrico, the city.
When
that
you
might be
say,
related.
are you talking about the transactions that and the money that you're spending?
Well, if this is a new auditing standard, the key audit matters, we're talking about it here, but I think it also crosses over to our individual jurisdictions. And I'm thinking, do I need to take this back to my individual jurisdiction and say, okay, we got some key areas that we need to look at here? How does that tie together?
Sure. As far as CVTA is concerned, I don't think you would have any key audit matters that rise to the level of calling it a key audit matter. When I think of how the transactions have happened through CVTA and looking at CVTA in general, yes, we need to make sure we have controls in place that when the funds that flow through to us, we have spent correctly. But I know your current audit firm will be looking at the new funds that have been established from CVTA and those funds that, and when I say fund, I'm talking about special revenue funds or capital projects funds. So as those things flow through to the individual localities, your audit firm will look at how those monies were spent, were they reimbursed correctly, and things of that nature. Your individual locality and your individual finance department should be talking or have probably already had the conversations with their auditors about camp.
Okay.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Garber, for joining us virtually. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you all. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to other business. Item 8, future meeting topics. This committee will dig into financial policy review and amendments in the future. Also, regional projects fund allocation is a normal discussion from this committee, so you can see that from the finance committee moving forward. Move on to item 9, CVTA finance committee member comments. Any comments from the members? This is a loquacious bunch.
I didn't have a comment.
Mr. Peterson.
Has nothing to do with CVTA, but it does have to do with the Hanover County Tomato Festival that's coming up this weekend.
Oh, really?
Friday and Saturday, Friday evening, a little more adult oriented, Saturday family oriented. But you can come out and get some of the best tomatoes in the state of Virginia or even the country, and have a good time with us in Hanover County. Would love to have you join us if you can find some time. It's 5 to 9 on Friday night at Polbreen Park, and 9 to 1 on Saturday.
Mr. Peterson, I concur. It's a good time. Been to one of the festivals before, and the tomatoes are delicious. Any other further comments from members?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Mr. Thorpe.
I want to compliment you and all the members of the Finance Committee. But as you know, we have been here since its inception. And I want to compliment you and my other colleagues on what I call the big C. And that's, if you hear me repetitively use this word a lot, that is about the collegiality that we have had, and that I want to say thanks to you for carrying on the business of the Finance Committee. And I think it says a lot about this new tool that we have. So I always think that flowers should be mentioned while a person can smell them. So I mentioned this as a metaphorical flower moment for you as you move on to other positions and all that. But it's good to hear a colleague say thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Thornton and I were actually having a discussion prior to the meeting about the last 2 years serving together on the CVTA and with everyone else. And my reflection is that a lot of people really don't get the opportunity to know individual people, and especially in the political arena. Many times you get to know the political persona and how people are perhaps portrayed in the media. And one of the things that I would urge the community, quite frankly, is if you don't know some of us, you should really get to know us. And I think the truly remarkable part of this in the last 2 years is the opportunity to get to know all of the members of the CVTA and on a more familiar level than just what you see from the outside. Whether you have the discussion, we've had personal discussions, we've all have had personal discussions, and I think those relationships are what leads to certainly what Mr. Thornton talked about, and the fact of the matter is that we're all able to work together to achieve an important goal, which is to provide for better transportation overall in Central Virginia, in many different facets, not just in road projects, but in even working with GRTC in that fashion. And so it's been a very good learning and enjoyable experience for me. And I don't want to be remiss and not talk about the fact that we're very fortunate, all of us, to have a really great group of people working for us to make this a seamless operation, whether it's our staff that we have certainly strong support through Plan RBA, or it's our own staff that we all know and rely on at the localities. And so, I know that we're going to be here for the next one because I know Richmond and Rico and Chesterfield and certainly Hanover are going to continue on not just in the CVTA, but also in the Finance Committee. But I think that we've made collectively really great decisions for Central Virginia. And I think we've been very responsible with the finances that have been bestowed upon us to utilize to the best of our ability for our communities. And I look forward to the next year and look forward to the other wonderful things that we'll be able to accomplish together. And I hope that we would get more perhaps public participation in the future where people can actually find out all the wonderful things that we're preparing for the community and to come out of the ground in the next 4 years, which are going to be game changers in many respects. Within the fall line, which is going to be a tremendous asset to many communities and certainly to the Richmond region. But when I look at the list of road projects that we approved, and certainly the $100 million that we put forward for the widening of 64, this is big stuff, and it'll come out of the ground in the future. And I will hope that the community will take an interest to see just how it all happened, because I think it really is the sausage making, as they say, in the background of how everything ends up. People often sit there and go, I didn't know they were going to do that, and then it comes out of the ground. You're like, how did that happen? And there's a lot behind the scenes that leads to that. And so I do want to commend, and I've said this to you personally before, but I'll say it again. I thought you've done a fantastic job as the chair of the Finance Committee for the last 2 years. So thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. And I'll just wrap up by saying.
Well, let me follow up
Okay,
on that
no,
before
Mr.
you wrap
Peterson.
up. I tend to agree with these guys too. You have done a great job. And as Mr. Carroll said too, it's important that the public learns more. Mr. Thornton, Mr. Winslow, and Mr. Williams sponsored a very nice editorial that was in the paper the other day that started to show some of the stuff, because all of us, I think, are pulling our hair sometimes when we hear about nobody gets along. This is a perfect example of how well we do work together. And we need to follow up on that, and a lot of that really comes from the leadership that you have provided on finance, and that you certainly, Mr. Norman, have provided for the CVTA as a whole. But everybody else has chipped in, and we really have had practically no real controversial issues at all. And everybody's been thinking about the whole region, and I think it's fantastic, and that does go back to the leadership we've had. So, thank both of you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And I will just say that in the years to come, whether they're your grandkids, your kids, great-grandkids, they will be able to see the fruits of our labor here, not just the first 2 years, but hopefully into perpetuity as well. And I'll add that I think that the legislation that was thought up by folks that we know, that was passed by the General Assembly and then put into action here, I will say it's working. It's working. And it's working because the personalities involved want to do what's right by the region. And that is provide the best transportation network locally, but regionally, compared to any other region in the state. And these personalities are people who come from different walks of life, they're from different parties, different communities, but the one thing they have in common, they're all from the greater Richmond region, and they care about our communities collectively. And it's almost like, it's beautiful to see that happen. You're right, people talk about it a lot, they want to create the conflict between the localities, but I've seen other regions of this state work together or not work together, and I say we do not have those same problems here in Central Virginia. So I want to thank my colleagues for their support and their help over the course of the last 2 years to make the Finance Committee a committee that works, a true business committee. And I'm looking forward to, as I have 2 more years on my term, working with you, Mr. Carroll, next year as the vice chair of the CVTA. And with that, we are adjourned.
Kevin, something you can tell a few minutes.
Yeah, we probably need to go in there.